Better is a little that the righteous person has than the abundance of many wicked. For the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but the Lord upholds the righteous. The Lord knows the days of the blameless, and their heritage will abide forever. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
And continuing in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 7, the first 14 verses, and then 24 through 29. Let us listen for the word of God. Do not judge, so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you make, you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get. Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, let me take the speck out of your eye, while the log is still in your eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine, or they will trample them underfoot and turn and maul you. Ask, and it will be given you. Search, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened for you. For everyone who asks receives, and everyone who searches finds, and for everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Is there anyone among you who, if your child asks for bread, will give a stone? Or if the child asks for a fish, will give a snake? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road is easy that leads to destruction, and there are many who take it. For the gate is narrow and the road is hard that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. May God add a blessing to the reading of this holy word. Best practices. They are the procedures and processes that are widely accepted in a particular industry because experience and research has proven that they provide superior outcomes. I first became familiar with this term when I was working as a hospital chaplain. Across the disciplines in healthcare, from chaplaincy to nursing to housekeeping, best practices are supposed to drive patient care. And that's why providers wash their hands when they go into and they leave your room, even if they don't touch you. It's why they ask you to rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10 every time they come in. And it's why they require that you wear those goofy little socks with the rubber things on the bottom if you've had anesthesia or are particularly frail. Over time, those actions, respectively, have been shown to result in fewer infections, better pain management, and smaller number of falls. I've learned since that language of best practices is used in education and business and agriculture and manufacturing, and I'm sure there are others who use it as well. But it made me wonder about the best practices of discipleship. What is it that really works in moving us as followers of Jesus from just offering lip service to the gospel, to saying the right words, to truly acting and living as people who are serious and committed to following Christ? Our gospel reading today is a continuation from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, which I said last week articulates most clearly the essence of who Jesus is and what it means to be a Christian. Best practices. Jesus acknowledges that it's challenging for us to follow him, right? To live in such a way that our outward behavior reflects what we say we believe. Particularly because what he offered to his disciples then was a radically different view from what it meant to live in relationship with other people compared with the mores and the standards of the Roman Empire, which was the occupying force that the original readers of Matthew's gospel lived under. The Sermon on the Mount encouraged them to imagine a different world, a world of different priorities and social structures and human interactions. And still today, Jesus' best practices for discipleship, for building a life and a faith and a community consistent with his teachings, fly in the face of our own culture. That's because it's God's character, as revealed in compassion and love and mercy, that we are called to model. That isn't what the world operates on. So, what are the best practices of discipleship? First, this one can be a little tough. Don't judge. Good luck with that, right? Most of us do it instinctively all day long without a second thought. And we don't always keep it to ourselves, right? We're often free with our opinions and assessments about what's wrong with everyone else. It's almost a national pastime, it seems to me, calling out and casting aspersions on every person with whom we disagree, who occupies the other camp, whichever one that is, who would dare to hold a view that's contrary to our own. With great satisfaction and deep conviction of our rightness, we don't just disagree, we denigrate and we demonize. We judge. To be clear, Jesus isn't saying that we can't ever judge. The church is actually called to name and cast judgment upon that which is unjust, like policies and systems that degrade and oppress and silence and separate us one from the other. And that's why when the church is true to its identity as the body of Christ, we say no to sins of poverty and racism. We advocate for those who have no power. We seek justice for people who have been denied it. We help by filling boxes at Christmas, by rebuilding homes, by putting food in children's backpacks, by buying blankets and llamas, by feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and housing the homeless. Standard Jesus-y stuff, right? But casting judgment on people with a critical spirit, without knowing who they are and what they've been through and how they've been shaped, does not foster relationship with them or compassion in us. Think of how easily we who are relatively affluent are so quick to cast blame on those who are poor and homeless and unemployed, without considering the circumstances that influenced their trajectory, or how public policies and social contracts and economies that don't work for everyone may have failed them. To base our assessments on their choices, on partial understandings, and filtering their experiences through our own is to grossly oversimplify complicated dynamics of class and race and gender and family and health and education and a whole host of other factors. The translation I read says, "Do not judge so that you may not be judged, for with the judgment you make you will be judged, and the measure you give will be the measure you get." The Message says this: don't pick on people, jump on their failures, criticize their faults, unless, of course, you want the same treatment. Both those translations suggest that God follows our lead when it comes to judgment. If we judge others harshly, God will judge us harshly. But if we refrain from judging others, God will refrain from judging us. Sobering stuff, huh? Related to judgment, another best practice is to avoid the oh-so-tempting tendency toward hypocrisy, revealed in Jesus' color images about logs and specks in people's eyes. So, to carry on the metaphor, most of us have 20/20 vision in regard to seeing what other people do wrong, and we can't even find our glasses when it comes time to look at our own mistakes. Self-awareness, Jesus says, is necessary in our observations about and our interactions with other people. As one scholar puts it, the law works best in Christian life when you apply it to yourself instead of to others. Another best practice of discipleship, of building faith and life and relationships and community: ask, seek, and knock with confidence, with boldness, because all of those actions are expressions of our desire to be in relationship with God, to be dependent on God, to be vulnerable with God, to be in communication with God, to listen to God through prayer. And what is it we're supposed to ask for and to seek? Good things for ourselves and good things for others, things that are necessary for life, things that are consistent with God's will and desire for us, for all of us: food and peace and healing and shelter and comfort and help and community and hope. You may already have recognized verse 12: "In everything do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets." It is Matthew's version of the Golden Rule: treating others as we wish to be treated. That's a best practice of discipleship if there ever was one, and it summarizes the human interactions that Jesus envisions throughout the Sermon on the Mount. Interactions that are marked by mutuality and humility and love and justice, and not by domination and control and humiliation. There's something like the Golden Rule in writings of various philosophies and religions. From Leviticus and the Hebrew Scriptures, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." In Hinduism, this is the sum of duty: do nothing to others which if done to you would cause you pain. In Buddhism, hurt not others with that which pains yourself. From the Jewish Talmud, which is their commentary on the Scriptures, "What is hateful to you, do not do to your fellow men." From Islam, "No one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself." And from Yogi Berra, who was a philosopher of sorts, "Don't do nothing you wouldn't want done to you." Jesus' teaching of the Golden Rule is about more than just being polite and civil and nice to each other. He places it within the law and the prophets, within the whole of Scriptures, meaning that our actions toward others individually and collectively are rooted in God's justice and God's fundamental commands to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves. Love is the key to best practices, loving God and loving others in response to God's love for us. And then finally, Jesus ends the Sermon on the Mount with the story of two people and the houses they build, two people who respond differently to Jesus' message. One hears Jesus' words and responds with action. The other hears Jesus' words and does nothing, makes no changes, doesn't do anything different about the way he or she lives and moves in the world. The first, Jesus says, constructs on a solid foundation so that even when storms come, the house is secure. The other one, Jesus says, constructs on sinking sand, which will eventually be destroyed when wind and waves hit the beach. It's not just Jesus who makes the solid foundation. It is our response to Jesus that creates the foundation upon which we construct our lives and our faith and our relationships. Discipleship, folks, is how we believe, not just about what we proclaim. And that's true for us individually, and it's true for the church. Because we can say all the right things, right? We can sing all the right songs and teach all the right passages and pray all the right prayers, but without action, without demonstrating what we say we believe in love and for the sake of justice, minus the judgment and hypocrisy, seeking always what is good for all of God's beloved ones, then we are missing the mark. Paul said, faith without works is dead. And Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth. But if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything. And Jesus said, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket. Jesus said, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven.